Good day, everybody. Yes, it's another Monday. State of the Nation, Nigeria. Yes, plenty to unpack, plenty to always talk about. There's been so many requests from people, like my last guest mentioned, that we need to restructure the country. Everybody keeps saying restructuring. A lot of school of thought have said our problem is just failure of leadership, which I tend to agree with to a very large extent, because I think the problem more seems to be enforcement of the existing laws. It's not as if we don't have the laws, but we just have to, implement it, what the law says. But today I have another very, very good guest, erudite, like always. He's a veteran journalist for that matter. And he's been there, he's seen it all. He's just the kind of person that we want. Say it the way it is. Fantastic track record, very eminent Nigerian. Today we have Sully Abu as our guest on State of the Nation on the Atlanta Discuss channel. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me.
We are very excited to have you. For those that don't know you, I'm sure a lot of Nigerians do know you and people all over Africa, but you've been everywhere in Africa. I mean, you have a long career in and around Nigeria, notably as East and Southern African correspondent with the Guardian newspaper. And you were regional editor for the African Guardian based in Harare, Zimbabwe. And you returned as a senior member of the editorial board and subsequently appointed editor-in-chief and managing director of the African Guardian. So after a few years, after the closure of the Guardian, I think during the Abacha years, you went into other things. You were with the NewAge newspaper, you founded it, and you also work with Abubakar Rimi. Then, we're going to talk a little bit about that. You're also the media main person for the Jonathan Goodluck campaign during the 2010-2011 period of the election cycle. And I know with you and two of your colleagues, Mr. Ezeze and Mr. Sonala, you are working on the advocacy and non-profit group called Front Fruit Media. So that's a lot. So for those of you that know him, I'm sure you know he's more than that. And to those hearing for the first time, just look at his name. I just barely summarize it, summarize it. So thank you once again for coming. I mean, you're a veteran journalist. I was looking through my list before we started, and I saw that quite a list of journalists have been detained in Nigeria over recent years. My list here I have Daniel Ojukwu, who is with the Foundation of Investigative Journalists. That's with Fisher Shoyombo. There's Fejiro Oliver over cybercrime. There's some journalists, so many. Brian Gaba, detained while covering a political rally. There's so many. I mean, some have names, some don't have names. It's a lot of pattern here. The broader pattern, Amnesty, everybody is complaining. So because of your pedigree, that's why my first question to you would be on journalism, government pressure and media independence. So across many African countries, there are growing concerns, a lot of growing concern about government intimidation of the press. From your experience, how subtle or overt has this pressure become, and what impact is it having on the newsroom and general independence of the press? Over to you, sir.
Our freedom of speech, freedom of the press, is when governments are bereft of ideas, when they are unable to deliver. The first recourse is to throttle contrary opinion, especially if that reporting or the opinionating is coming from journalists. I'm not saying that the media doesn't make mistakes. Journalists make mistakes, but there's no media house or newspaper worth its salt that would knowingly put out false information. And even if they do, even if the information they put out is false in some respects, they should, or would rather, be the first to carry a retraction to apologize. But we have a shrinking civic space, as you said. It's like there's no contrary opinion that can pass muster with our politicians, partly because they have no opinion of their own what is sought. And they engage in all manner of projects, dubious projects. You find state governors, for instance, building flyovers in a place where They only have a few cars plying that particular stretch of road. And you wonder, what is the point of this flyover? Well, of course, your guess is as good as mine. Huge contracts. Huge contracts. And if you point that out as a journalist, you become an enemy of the state. But the media doesn't have a choice but to soldier on. It's just a pity that the state of the media today is pretty poor. You hardly have independent journalism, the situation where the economic plight of newspaper houses and other media houses is so poor that governments pay the salaries of journalists. At the end of the month, they go to the government office or government house and they go and collect their monthly stipends because their own media houses cannot come up with the money to pay their salaries. So when that happens, what quality of journalism would you expect? And anyone who goes against the grain, any media house or journalist that goes against the grain, when almost all his colleagues are part of this process of information collection, dissemination, because the press secretaries or whoever hands that to the journalists, the write-up or the press release, which they are expected to go and reproduce almost verbatim. Anyone who goes against this is labeled as an enemy of the state or enemy of the government. And that further destroys the reputation and the credibility of the media. It's a pity, but there's a lot going on in the country that's of a negative dimension that you just wonder how we're going to get out of this situation. In the garden in those days, we used to look at the situation and shake our heads, but take consolation in the words. This too shall pass. These days, the morale is so low that you wonder whether all this shall pass and how soon. Thank you very much.
Nigeria is facing significant economic pressure. I mean, the statistics that they reel out sometimes looks good, but there's a trickle-down effect that it's not positive. So from inflation to currency instability and rising cost of living, from your vantage point as a seasoned journalist, how would you assess the real impact of these challenges on ordinary Nigerian beyond the official statistics that we see every day? Over to you, sir.
The economic situation in Nigeria today beggars belief. In other words, very few Nigerians could ever have imagined that things will deteriorate so badly that there are countless millions who are unable to eat a proper meal in a day. In the past, even when as students, you do what they call smoke gari. You can, for very little money, you can go and buy gari and groundnuts and eat and allow the gari to swell after putting water, and you have a meal that fills the stomach at least for some hours, if not for the whole day. But today, gari has become a precious commodity. And then you wonder, when all these statistics are reeled out by the World Bank, IMF, and sundry institutions about how well the economy is doing, are they talking about the same Nigeria? What use are statistics when people are dying of hunger, when people have no food to eat? So the cost of living today, is almost are quantifiable in terms of the inflationary pressures. You buy something for a particular sum one day, by the next day, you can hardly recognize, the price tag that's upon that commodity or what the traders in the market are telling you. And sometimes it's even the traders in the market will be sympathizing with you and say, well, this is the way I've seen things. So I think of all the things you can knock this government on the head for, is why they allow the economic situation to deteriorate so badly that people cannot even do something as basic as eating. No wonder, we're having all kinds of statistics about Nigeria harboring the poorest number of people in the world, about Nigeria harboring people, the most hungry population in the world, and so on. So if the government is serious, from what they've done so far, don't appear as if they have any answers. They would want to reassess their approach and get people to be able to eat. Handing out palliatives, bags of rice, and so on, to a couple of millions. That doesn't do it. It doesn't solve the problem. What about the other millions that have no access to these official handouts? In any case, you know how corruption has so permeated the system that even those doing the handing out sometimes are believed to help themselves more to the items than the people for whom these items are meant. So the situation is quite dire, and the public mood is very ugly, very, very ugly. You buy jeeps for 200, 250 million when most people can barely afford bus fares. Now, that's provocation, if you ask me. That's utter provocation. People's patience, I'm afraid, is no longer as elastic as it used to be. And sometimes you just pray that nothing provokes, a coming anarchy that such situations could easily trigger off.
All right, so let's talk about insecurity, banditry, what have you. This is really a very serious problem we're having. I know the network is bad, but I'll try and pick it up. Yeah. So insecurity from banditry to terrorism, okay, remains, it's a very big concern to everybody. Some have said, well, the soldiers are ready to do it, but they don't have the platforms to do it. So do you think the Nigerian state is effectively addressing these threats? Or there are deeper structural failures in the security architecture of Nigeria that is hindering, the final solution to what we call terrorism, banditry, and what have you? How about you, sir?
The insecurity situation is so serious, yet at the time, sometimes so simple in terms of the way it should be tackled. It started off as some little problem by quote unquote miscreants, by those who in the north are referred to as Almajiri. But through mismanagement, through lack of seriousness, beginning from the Obasanjo administration, lack of proper appreciation of the alienation of large segments of the population, it has snowballed to a major security situation. So serious that otherwise patriotic Nigerians will be happy that a foreign power like the United States under Donald Trump will be hailed for coming to bomb the rest of the country inhabited by these bandits. Let's not forget that the Nigerian military was one of the most celebrated in the world. The United Nations always came right from the Congo crisis of the 1960s. The United Nations made contributions from Nigeria their preference. The insecurity, banditry problem, terrorism problem in Nigeria has gotten so bad that we'll see what's going on in Maiduguri, going on in the northeast, not talk of the northwest. People cannot sleep with their two eyes closed. That's even if they can sleep at all. You don't know where these bandits or kidnappers and terrorists are going to emerge from, in the next minute. People thought that Buhari, being a military man, was going to get to the kernel of the problem and sort it out. But for reasons best known to him, his approach was rather mealy-mouthed. He didn't acknowledge the depth of the problem at the beginning, and there was this feeling that he believed that these kidnappers, these terrorists, are people he shared the same religion or whatever it is with. And therefore, there was no attempt to vigorously go after this problem until it became so bad that it became too late for him to do anything tangible about it. Yes, they poured in arms, they poured in personnel and so on. At the time, he said terrorism had been technically defeated. What did that mean? What does technical defeat mean? The bandits were still operating, they were still kidnapping, they were still killing, they were bombing and so on. And the problem has only grown worse under Tinubu. Look at the states that are under siege. Plateau, Benue in the middle belt, Kogi, Kwara now, let's talk of the northeast, Katsina, Daura, even Buhari's own hometown, but especially Katsina, the state capital, and its environs, the hinterlands. The bandits have free reign, and lives are being wasted. Innocent lives, lives of our military personnel and policemen, and it appears the government does not have the answer. But this is ludicrous because everybody recognizes that the Nigerian military was one of the best in the world. Our soldiers are highly professional, whether in peacekeeping duties or in peace enforcement, as we saw in Sierra Leone and Liberia. So how come the same military that won plaudits all over the world, from the UN and so on, has become so useless that ragtag bands of Almajiri, people who, at the beginning we say, oh, these are just Almajiris, are running rings around them. Look at our officers being captured and killed, colonels. What is going on? What is going on? The Nigerian state is not effectively addressing these things, partly because people believe those in positions of authority are not affected. But they have villages, they come from villages, they come from the hinterland and so on. Though these days it is believed that most of them don't even go to their villages, don't go to the hinterland. In fact, there's a joke in Abuja that Abuja has become a refugee center. That Abuja is the new diaspora for politicians and political types, to take refuge in. But the belief is that if the government is serious, if the government is really serious, they can get to grips with this problem in only a matter of months. Only a matter of months. One doesn't know what's going on in Plateau State, for instance, where you have bands of so-called Fulani herdsmen, occupying settlements, destroying people's means of livelihood, and so on. The military, the security services should be given free course to go after these people, whoever they are. And those who are talking about negotiating with these bandits and so on. Where in the world do you see governments putting down insurgency by surrendering to the insurgents, negotiating with them, appeasing them, giving them money with which they go and buy even more weapons? So what the government needs to do is clear. They should ensure that the security service and the military, that their morale is high, equip them, and tell them they need take no prisoners because we're in a war situation. The approach of, capturing the terrorists and they say you are going to rehabilitate them, training them, and so on. What are the stories we're hearing? Some of these so-called fellows who have been rehabilitated, turn out to be informants or their ex-wife comrades in the bush. Any government that is serious will know what to do. And I know that our military officers who are retired, soldiers who are retired, who saw action all over the world, they are highly motivated by what's going on. I think the government needs to be a bit more serious with regards to tackling this insecurity that has all sorts of ramifications, loss of lives, loss of economic livelihood for people, inflation, food inflation, and so on.
Okay. Let's look at governance and accountability. People have said, we should just go to the parliamentary system of government, that this presidential system is too expensive. 704 local government, 36 governor, 36 deputy governor, blah, blah, blah. It's too much. That means every governor needs a 10 four-wheel drive, deputy governor needs 8 four-wheel drive, SSG needs 4, all that. Yeah. So to what extent do you think leadership and governance gap have contributed to both economic crisis and the insecurity in Nigeria? Do you think the politicians are distracted? What really is the bone of contention here? Yeah.
Governance and accountability. The whole essence of good governance is to be able to hold those in positions of authority accountable for their actions, for their deeds. But unfortunately, in the past couple of decades, we have seen accountability deteriorate in the system. Those in positions of authority increasingly do not believe that they should be held accountable. And you find that increasingly, politicians or those who aspiring politicians see public service as an avenue purely for private gain. So what do you find? Hardly any major project is done at minimum cost, is done with the buy-in of the people, is done in such a way as to deliver the best of public service. Everything is intertwined. The economic crisis in the country today is exacerbated not only by the insecurity in the land, but primarily by the lack of accountability. And you see this manifested by those in positions of authority going after the media, going after the press. The press has become the whipping boy for those in authority. And you find people being arrested, being harassed for reporting issues that were those in authority sincere. They could issue clarifications, not in order to give their own side of the story. But now the first impulse is to go after the journalists. The first impulse is to harass people. You hardly find anyone these days issuing a correction for anything, or for whatever they may have thought was a misreporting of the facts of a case. So, our problems are hydra-headed, but in short order, accountability lies at the root of it. State governors are like local potentates. They do what they like, they pocket the state houses of assembly, and God help you if you are a critic of the state government and you live in that state capital. Your safety, your security cannot be taken for granted in the event. This is why some of us shudder at this whole notion of having state police. State policemen in today's climate, where governors are not accountable to anyone, whoa, that's a recipe for terrible repression of political opponents and contrary voices.
Okay. Okay, let's talk about free and fair election. Okay. If you can hear me, just yeah. Nigerian democracy often comes under scrutiny during the election cycle. Based on your experience covering African politics, how credible are Nigerians' electoral process today, and what must change to ensure truly free and fair election in the Nigerian polity? Go ahead, sir.
The environment for free and fair elections hardly exists in the country anymore. Unlike the First Republic, even the Second Republic, where you have political parties with discernibly different ideologies and approaches. Say, take the NPN and the PRP, in the First Republic, or the UPN. There were clear lines of demarcation between what they each believed. In those days, there were vigorous debates about the approaches of the different parties. I remember growing up, how the late Chief Awolowo would come up with programs, which he arrived at through some serious work. Time he had what they call the 5-point program: free education, free health, and so on. And it was being mocked by by his political opponents. But when they saw that he was serious and was carrying out these programs, they made attempts to imitate him, at least in some of the programs. Now, I suspect that because our politicians are unable or unwilling to apply themselves intellectually to seeking solutions for our problems, their first recourse is to try to rig the electoral processes in their favor. Today, the environment for free elections, with nearly all the state governors, about 3 or 4, joining the ruling party, the APC, that environment hardly exists for free and fair elections. There's no debate. You don't know what the APC stands for. You don't know what the even the new one they call ADC. You don't know what they really stand for. The Labour parties are 6s and 7s. The PDP the same thing. You know. So it is a bleak picture, a bleak environment for free and fair elections. And I think that something may have to give. Our politicians, if they are serious, they need to go back to the drawing board. They need to make ideas and issues the center points of their political engagements. I hope it's not too late, because sometimes you look at the quality, the caliber of people who are running for public office, the National Assembly, State House of Assembly, even governorship positions, and you shudder whether such people are qualified to deliver any thoughtful ideas that will make things work better. In fact, I remember a friend, he's late now, was a minister in the Shagari government and was a minister subsequently, you know, and a friend and I engaged him on why the political environment was so barren of ideas and so on. And he shook his head and said, you know, he was put in charge of coming up with a program, a manifesto for his political group at the time, political party at the time. He calls meetings and nobody shows up, or maybe 1 or 2 or 3. When he insists, you know, one time someone was quarreling with him openly and telling him that, you know, winning elections do not take ideas, do not take any intellectual engagement. That encounter with this fellow who is late now was about 20 or more years ago, or just a little less than 20 years ago. So imagine what it is today. So I hate to sound so despondent, but the ingredients for a free and fair election, one that is governed by ideas, one that gives us credible alternatives, that environment does not exist today.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Sully Abu. You've spoken well. You've spoken like a patriot, and we're definitely going to bring you back. I think the key thing there is that everybody has a role to play. It's not just enough to blame those in government. You know, it's unfortunate that most of the key indices for a failed state it's what Nigeria is taking out from health and security, you know, governance. We need more strategic role to be played by the traditional and religious institution. There's no country in the world that has been liberated, that's come from the abyss, that the Islamic leaders, that's clerics, Christian clerics, even traditional, what you call the ancestral worship. Everybody has a role to play. So it's not just enough to just sit there and criticize. I mean, people have to vote also, you know, and so there's so much in the entire Nigerian government, but we all have a role. I think we're all guilty one way or the other. You understand? Everybody, I don't write people off. You know, liberation can come from any angle, but the strategic importance is that we don't have too much time. You know, I can't imagine us going through 2 election cycles that will be as abysmal as the last one. I seriously don't think that can ever happen. Do you understand? Because the one we're going into now, if it's not fair and fair, it's going to be a fiasco for the country. You know, I mean, I'm sure those that are in government, they know that. even the opposition know that, we do not have the foundation to withhold, an insincere and unfair and a very, very horrible election cycle again. It's just a no-brainer. So it's a wrap there. I'll see you guys on Friday. God bless you all. Take care. Bye.